Hello, I'm your host, Skeptical Scott.
And I'm this week's guest, Larry Jordan.
It's funny you say that, the heathen, there and back again. What are the things you've heard or read that made you scratch your head? Hey, you're not alone in your thinking, so let's start the show. Listeners, you hear in our usual introduction the play off of The Hobbit, There and Back Again. And from what I hear, many of you are somewhere on that deconstruction or reconstruction journey. Today, we have an interview with someone who knows what it's like to meander on that path. Perhaps turn over a few rocks and check them out. This has led to him having many powerful experiences, such as baking in a sweat lodge, chanting to Shiva, meditating in a zendo, and whirling with the dervishes. Whoa, wow, what is all that? Well, we're about to hear. Larry wrote about it in his book, The Way, informed by Eastern religions, the mystics, and quantum physicists. Jim Palmer, founder of the Center of Non-Religious Spirituality, said of Larry's work, if you read only one book to guide your deconstruction and reconstruction process, this would be the one to read. It's also a 2024 Nautilus Book Award winner. I'm currently enjoying Larry's contributions at pathos.com. Check out our show notes for more. So after growing up in a conservative Christian household, where does Larry find himself now? Well, hey, it's about time we get to it. Please welcome to the show, Larry Jordan. Hello, Larry.
Thanks so much for that introduction. Just wonderful.
Hey, was there any corrections? Anything to add?
No, you're good. You're good.
All right, good.
I was just going to say, I did turn over a few rocks.
Yes, I have a friend named Bob who describes it that way, and it's always stuck in my brain after that. So, yeah, I'll tell you, it's the baking in the sweat lodge, etc., that really grabbed my attention. Let's start with today. Where do you find yourself today? Like literally, I find myself here in West Michigan. Where are you?
Well, I'm fortunate enough to be in Crestone, Colorado. Yeah, normally we're in Arlington, Texas. Twice a year for 1 month each, we come to Colorado and hike around and tromp on the sand dunes, and we bake in hot springs, and there's a bunch of spiritual centers here.
Oh,
Crestone
man.
Featured in the book. So very cool place.
That sounds incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
And when it comes to your spiritual beliefs and or practices, where would you say you are today?
I have a pretty eclectic spirituality, and I don't want to put anybody off by the term spirituality.
Right.
I take that to mean that you believe in something bigger than yourself. Just to say it in a couple sentences, and then I'll double back. When the planes hit the towers in 9/11,
Mm-hmm.
I got really interested in Islam. Just wondering, well, what kind of religion would do that? And it's really not Islam that did that. It's not the Quran. It's not Muhammad. It's fundamentalists basically.
Correct. Yes.
But
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I got to thinking, I don't really know that much about my own tradition. And I've been a Catholic for, at that point, 50 years or so. And I really didn't know that much about the belief system or where it came from. It's like a hobby that got out of control. I ended up reading about 1,000 books and had all the experiences you mentioned and more. I thought at the time, well, I'm going to retire soon. Maybe I'll be a deacon in the Catholic Church. I should know more about it. And hey, there's 2 billion believers. The religion is 2,000 years old. There's a book, What Could Go Wrong? A bunch can go wrong. Yeah.
So you were in a time of transition is what it sounds like. And then that event kind of jarred you as well.
Yes, exactly. And I was also, I was kind of in midlife. I didn't have a crisis, but I did kind of say, is this all there is? I had been in the investment banking business, which was really competitive, really interesting, really lucrative, really stressful. And, I did a lot of travel. I worked like a dog. And so, at 55 or so, I'm like, well, or sooner than that, at 52, I just said, look, I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing this. So I also ended up doing a lot of volunteering, and that's in the book. And there's a lot of life lessons when you get out of your silo, where everybody looks like you, thinks like you, talks like you, and all of a sudden you're you're visiting homeless shelters, or you're doing taxes for low-income people, or you're driving veterans to the VA, and you just meet all kinds of folks. So my life kind of opened up.
That sounds great. And the description I see is you're a follower of Jesus with a Zen practice. And so that, of course, sounds really interesting to me in terms of how you, like, I guess, spread that out a little bit. What does that mean?
Well, as I said, what could go wrong? A lot could go wrong. As I discovered, I was looking into Christianity and its roots, and I thought, well, everything here is, it's absolute, it's original, it's unchanging, it's universal. Came right out of Jesus' mouth, and the first pope told the second pope, and none of that is true.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, Christianity inherited a lot from other traditions. For folks that think that the Bible is inerrant, they probably haven't read the Bible. For folks that think that the Pope is infallible, they probably haven't looked into how that came about. There's a lot of Greek philosophy that found its way into religion. So basically, at the end of the day, I thought, well, and some fundamental things. I mean, as fundamental as like the Trinity
mm-hmm.
or original sin. There are allusions to those things in the Bible, but it's really, what we think of as the doctrine of original sin or the doctrine of the Trinity came about hundreds of years after Jesus' death. And so it's like a grief process. And you've probably talked to other people that have done this. You might have done it yourself.
Sure. Definitely. Yeah.
And I became angry. I didn't think anybody intentionally tried to hurt me, but I just thought, a lot of people didn't do the homework I did, told me a lot of things that they represent as facts that are not facts. And if you're going to have an issue with gay people because of your church and you're going to act unkindly towards people, you got to rethink that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I had what they call a dark night of the soul, where I just thought, well, gee, I started out with the intention of basically confirming what I believed, and I didn't land there at all. I just questioned everything I believed. And one thing I think more fundamental than that, a lot of people think, well, Christianity is just like every other religion. Everybody has beliefs, and these beliefs make more sense than other people's beliefs. Really, other religions are about experience. They're about practice. They're about what you do and how you live. And it's not about beliefs. There's no Hindu creed. There's no Muslim creed. There's no Jewish creed. There's no Buddhist creed. I just came to hold my beliefs a lot more loosely. And with respect to Jesus, I think he's a pretty compelling guy. And,
certainly,
he knows a lot about how to live. And really, if somebody says, well, I'd rather follow Jesus than, follow Buddha or Muhammad or Krishna, it's like, well, if you're following Jesus, you're following those other guys most of the way.
Yeah, great point.
I really, at this point, don't believe in a personal God. I certainly don't believe in the God of the Bible. I don't believe God is a man or a male. I believe that Jesus was very close to what he called God or the Father, but I don't think he was God himself. I don't think he was born of a virgin. I don't think he was physically resurrected. And there's Christians that say, well, you're not even a Christian.
I think that's what's threatening, right? Is that, wait, if you're saying these things aren't true, then that means the whole thing might not be true. I can't do that. That's like a house of cards. There's a threat there. Yeah,
exactly. And see, when I say I'm a follower of Jesus, there's a story about the rich young man where he asks Jesus, what do I do to be saved? He says, well, follow the law. Sounds kind of Jewish, but he was Jewish. And he said, well, yeah, I do that. Jesus said, okay, well, be a good person. Sounds kind of Catholic. That's how the original Christians started, or they started something like that. He says, yeah, I'm a good person. What else? Okay, sell your stuff and follow me. And so at 52, I did that.
Did you really?
Yeah, I quit my job. I was an investment banker, and I was making a lot of money. But what am I going to do with more money at that point? I'm going to buy a bigger house or drive a nicer car or wear more expensive suits. I mean, I just didn't see it. And I traveled a lot, and I know the average person makes $2 a day or something like that. There's just a lot of impoverished places out there. So I thought, I've just been taking a lot more than I've been giving. And this story of the rich young man haunted me. So, I get a little prickly when somebody says, well, how can you say you're a follower of Jesus? I said, I don't know how I could be more, I did the one thing that he asked me to do.
Oh,
He
right.
didn't,
Yeah. Now I see it.
he didn't
Yeah.
ask me. Yeah. He didn't ask me to go to mass every week like the Catholics. He didn't ask me to accept him as his Lord and Savior. He said, sell your stuff and follow me. So I did it.
Wow.
I know most people don't have the flexibility to do that. I'm grateful that I did, but I put my money where my mouth is the point. Now, the Zen practice, the second half of the book, I think is the interesting half. I wrote the first part because if I say, well, I wrote a book about spirituality, that somebody says, well, I'm really interested about hearing about, God the Father and Jesus, his only begotten Son, and the Bible. I said, well, that's in there, but I'm going to repeat for you my exploration, and I'm not going to tell you it's all hogwash. I'm just going to tell you your foundation is not as firm as you think it is, and you should not hold your beliefs as firmly as you do. And basically, when we talk about the Eastern religions and the mystics and the quantum physicists, those guys are all telling you there's an underlying oneness, and that at the end of the day, everybody's related and everything's connected. There are people who are disappointed, say, I can't believe you went on a 20-year spiritual journey and that's all you came up with. And I say, it's really all I need.
Yeah.
And not to get political. Yeah. But you can't avoid being political.
Saying nothing is political, right?
Exactly. And, if everybody's related, hey, I've got to think about, would I do this to myself? Would I do this to my brother? Would I do this to my son? And no, I wouldn't ban Muslims. I wouldn't build walls. I wouldn't separate families. I wouldn't take away people's health care. I wouldn't marginalize LGBTQ people or anybody else. The Dalai Lama says, my religion is kindness. And that's basically it. When he says that, I agree with him. When Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, I agree with him.
Pretty up there as far as, hey, Jesus, boil this down. Was it boiled down to? When that's one of the first things he says, I think that's pretty important. So
yeah,
thank you for that. You wrote to me that you're equally comfortable now with religious people, spiritual but not religious, atheists, free thinkers. Hey, Larry, you're in good company to the listeners of this podcast. So,
okay.
Consider these as quick little bunny trails. When you said baking in a sweat lodge, where did you just transport yourself?
Well, there was a Native American man here in Crestone, Colorado.
Yeah.
He basically operates a sweat lodge. And you get into a little structure, and they close the doors, and it gets really, really super hot in there. And there's chanting, and it's a very it just takes you out of your comfort zone, way the heck out of your comfort zone.
Otherworldly, probably, after a while.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, when we were in there, this is not me, but somebody else in there had a vision of a white wolf. So I asked the shaman afterwards, I said, what is that? And he said, well, everything is energy. And that's what the physicist will tell you as well. Mm-hmm. And we all perceive the energy the way that we're accustomed to perceiving it. So there might be somebody that sees a bright light. There might be somebody that sees Jesus. There might be somebody that sees a white wolf. It kind of framed the way I think about things. In the book, I talked about people who believe in a personal God that they call God, or an impersonal God. They might just say the universe. And anymore, I talk about ultimate reality. That's really what the Buddhists and the Hindus talk about. Mm-hmm. And in Buddhism, there's void, they basically say, look, everything's impermanent. Everything's impersonal. You think you have a self. It's really a construct. And we're here to really experience life and reduce suffering. Beneath all that is, if you don't really have a self or a soul in the sense that Western religions sometimes think you do, and if everything's impermanent, what is sort of underlying everything? And they just say the void, emptiness. But there is something in Buddhism, in the Heart Sutra, they say, emptiness is form, form is emptiness. In other words, there's two aspects of reality. Now, in Hinduism, They talk about Brahman, which is basically everything. Brahman interpenetrates everyone and everything. And that's why the Hindus, if you go practice yoga, they say, Yam Namaste.
Mm-hmm.
The divinity in me recognizes the divinity in you. At the same time, we do have apparent individuality. But again, underlying the whole thing is fullness. And you might say, well, which is it? Fullness or emptiness? And I would say, it doesn't really matter.
I'd say yes.
It's semantics at that point. Yeah, yes. Yes. The key concept is there is underlying this apparent separation is a lack of separation, an essential lack of separation. That you and I, in the apparent separation, we answer to different names, we live in different places, we were born at different times, we'll die at different times, we look like individuals, but in fact, we're just living part of the same life. And if you dig down and say, well, as a matter of fact, they do this in Hinduism, and they'll say, who am I? And I might say, well, I'm a writer. Hey, man, you weren't always a writer. Well, I'm a grandfather. Here we go again. You weren't always a grandfather. Well, I'm a retired guy. Now, what are you talking about? You weren't always a retired guy. And, when you peel away, what am I? I'm just the same essential stuff that you are.
Well, hey, Larry, do you watch Star Wars?
I do.
I don't know if you watch the new stuff, but The Mandalorian frequently says, This is the way.
There you go.
I understand that early Christians, they called themselves as followers of the way, maybe in reference to John 14:6, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. So why did you title your book The Way?
That's a great question, and I get it sometimes. Just real quickly from something Jim Palmer said, because he addressed this in my foreword.
Great.
He says, do not mistake the title, The Way, as an arrogant claim to absolute truth. The title rightfully identifies the fact that a broad spectrum of fields of knowledge and investigation has produced a unified understanding of ultimate reality, even if different language is used to describe it. And just to personalize a little bit, I was really looking for truth. I wasn't really looking for people's opinions or beliefs or speculation. And, I got to something very universal that, whether Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, or the Dalai Lama says, kindness is my religion, or Larry Jordan says, and I'm not in the same category as those two guys, but, everyone's related and everything's connected. The people with a Christian background think that the way is a very narrow constraint. You can only get there, in one manner. But in Buddhism, they talk about the way. The Tao is translated the way.
Mm-hmm.
If you understand this concept of interconnectedness, I wouldn't say all, but almost all of the brightest minds that have ever lived will make more sense to you. You can read philosophers like Spinoza. You can read scientists like Einstein. You can read the mystics like Meister Eckhart. And all of a sudden you say, that's really what this is all about, the interconnectedness. And as Martin Luther King said, if one of us is hurt, we're all hurt. And so it just to me was the right way to express this universal truth that I kept bumping into. And, I tell people I'm shocked in a way that I went to Christian church for 50 years and, they sort of danced around the topic, nobody ever said, look, we all have beliefs. We don't know if our beliefs are true or not. But, the one truth is the interconnectedness.
Yeah, I know this might seem a little weird, but when I back out and see the planet Earth and we see how small we really are, I mean, the way, it's kind of just our path on this Earth, this little speck.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you say is it's not the way, like you have the way, but more of that question of what's the way you're picking? What's the way you're choosing? Tell us about the cover, like what your cover looks like of your book.
Well, that's an interesting story. Yeah, I vacationed near the Great Sand Dunes, and my wife took a picture of me walking across the dunes, and all you could see was, my footprints and this lonely guy, in this oasis of sand. So I told the guy that was doing my book with me, that's what I want to use for the cover. And he said, well, no, it's kind of a grainy picture. It's kind of colorless. Maybe we can find something that looks like that. So the cover of the book is a bunch of sand dunes, and there are a bunch of footprints in the dunes following the same broad path, and it's walking towards a sunrise. And I said, well, I really thought I wanted one set of footprints. And then I thought, no, this is better. This is better. There's Spinoza, there's Einstein, and there's Carl Jung, and
there you go.
Joseph Campbell. I mean,
I like that. Generally going the same direction.
Yeah.
There are many paths but what we have in common is that we each have our own.
Yeah, exactly right.
But this is what I most appreciate, Larry, is that you're able to really take from the Western worldview and the Eastern worldview. I think you said something like apart from us versus a part of us.
Yeah.
The duality where I guess we're looking at here. So keep going on this. Keep going on this. I'm loving this. When you think, especially for people who aren't familiar with the West and the East.
This is how I started the book, because I say in the book, I was trying to soften the soil. I wanted that guy that thinks that spirituality is all about the Bible and Jesus to step back a little bit and say, well, that's not what we all think. There's 8 billion people. Yeah, it's not so solid. There's 8 billion people in the world. 6 billion of them don't know what you're talking about.
And if you say it louder, it doesn't mean it's more solid.
Right. Right.
Right. I think we've all been in a church service like that.
Well, and there's a reluctance to explore. I had a guy, I'm walking the park and he's walking the park and he says, do you want to talk about Jesus? And I said, sure, I love to talk about Jesus. So he starts to evangelize me. And I was like, wait a second,
I thought talk meant two-way, right?
Yeah, I've done a little digging on this. I'm not sure you know as much as you think you know.
Are you sure you want to talk about Jesus?
Yeah.
Anyway, keep going.
So he says, have you ever read Charles Spurgeon? I said, well, yeah, I have. It's been a while. Well, you should read this book. I said, I will. I said, you should read the Bhagavad Gita. It's a Hindu scripture.
Yeah.
Short, understandable, profound. So next time I see him, he says, well, did you read Spurgeon? I said, yeah, I did. Did you read the Gita? No, I didn't. And I knew he wouldn't. And I basically said, look, what are we going to talk about? You're like a guy with one language. And that's how I talk about religions. All religions cultural, all theology speculation. And, religions are like languages. They're different ways of expressing the inexpressible.
Yeah.
So if I'm talking to you and you don't talk my language, we can't really have a conversation.
I think from now on, and I have started doing this, so I know I will. Anytime somebody says, "I need you to listen to this Jesus podcast, this episode," it's going to blow your mind, or I need you to read this book, that I'm going to say yes, but here's one. Let's both do homework,
right?
And then we'll talk. And then we'll talk.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful.
So Zen, I mentioned void, for instance, which is kind of a weird word. And I'm having a cigar with a really good friend of mine who's a Christian minister. And I said, yeah, I'm really interested in Buddhism. And they talk about void, which is a weird word. And he says, well, it's really not. Void is mentioned in Genesis, and void is basically what was here before anything was created. And I said, well, that's kind of the same thing. It's a reference to the same thing. So when you study these different traditions, you can connect some dots. You can see people explaining the same concept, essentially, in different ways. And you can see some things that people think, oh, well, that's unique to my religion. It's really not. The Western religions are all about personal gods and really all about personhood. And, it's like, I'm a person, I have a soul, I have free will. My politics is about personal responsibility. My religion is about personal salvation.
Very individual. And that whatever God I'm following is also an individual, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But in the East, it's like, well, that's interesting, because some of us think that self is a construct. I mean, it's your chemistry, it's your conditioning, it's your experience, it's randomness. we think soul is a fiction. I mean, if everyone's related and everyone's connected, there's an underlying oneness. There's a fullness or an emptiness that underlies the physical world. How could you be separate? How could there be a Larry Jordan that outlives Larry Jordan's body? It just doesn't compute. And free will, the people that study free will say, I don't know, when did you decide, for instance, that you were going to be on this podcast? Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know. I mean, someone called me and I kind of thought it would be a good, but we don't just get up and decide. It's like if I asked you, when did you decide to get out of bed?
When I got out of bed, I don't know. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
That things lead to the next. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And, they've done studies that say, well, we studied the brain to see when you decided to get out of bed. And interestingly, you decided to get out of bed about 10 seconds after you actually got out of bed. So,
That's good.
Maybe your brain is reporting to you on what's happening. It's not really deciding what's going to happen. And maybe some of your actions and words and thoughts are as unconscious as your breathing, as your heartbeat, as you sweat when you're hot and you shiver when you're cold. You don't decide to do any of those things.
You're catching up. Yeah.
Yeah. And, Tom Waits, singer-songwriter, says,
oh, yeah,
we are all monkeys with money and guns. And,
yeah.
And that makes a lot more sense
sure
in a
does.
world where everything's connected than a world where, no, we have separation. We're in God's image. We're very different. There's a big bright line because I have a soul and my dog doesn't have a soul. It's a very different way of thinking about things.
All right. Well, this has been great so far. And so now I want to focus on the word deconstruction, not too much here, but just why do you believe that word? It's kind of it's been a tasty word the last 10 years, I would say. Like people are really latching onto this. It's certainly all over TikTok and stuff. Why do you think that word deconstruction is so threatening in, I guess I'm going to say, in our country today?
Well, people take their beliefs very personally, and some of the wisdom of Zen is, hey, nothing is personal, and so if you question someone's beliefs, they feel like you're questioning them, and they also feel like, hey, I hope I didn't make a mistake about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But one thing that's been really helpful about the book is it's not really prescriptive. I mean, it asks a lot of questions. You can tell that as a person, I had a journey that I ended up in a totally different place than where I started. But it's a really tolerant book and it's a respectful book. And I've had people say, I read the book and I'm a better Christian. I say, good.
Yeah.
I have other people say, yeah, I've read the book and you had a lot of the same questions I had, or you connected the dots in a way that I wish I would have, or you have raised questions that I hadn't even thought about. So I tell people, look, it's not a bad thing to ask questions, and it's not a bad thing to change your mind.
That's the reconstruct part, right? I mean, the way I kind of see you with the book, it's laying the pieces out. It's like, wait, what do I believe? Going back to the brain and what we believe and what's happening. So many times we're unaware of what our decisions are, the free will part. And so it's just like, all right, let's slow down for a second. Let me lay all the pieces out here on the table. Wait, how do these fit? And what does this make sense? That's the deconstruct part. Now the reconstruct is that second half of your book. I think that's why people appreciate it. Now the pieces are laid out, and now it's up to me what I do with it.
Yes, exactly. And one point I want to connect here, I don't want anyone to come away thinking, well, I don't know, he said a bunch of things about fullness and emptiness and connection, and it just sounds like woo-woo stuff to me. Mm-hmm. There's two places that I send people. One is, it's a YouTube video. It's only 20 minutes long. It's one of the most viewed videos out there, and it's called My Stroke of Insight. And it's a brain scientist who experienced a stroke, and the stroke was in the left side of her brain. if you know anything about the hemispheres, the right side is very creative, intuitive, and the left side's very analytical and linear. And so, when I talk about the apparent separation and the underlying oneness, if it's easier to you to think about right brain and left brain, just think about every day we live in our left brains. We wake up and we have schedules, we have to get to work, and we have to put food on the table, and we have to pick up the kids. The whole time we also have a right brain which is not making lists, making distinctions. So when the brain scientist, My Stroke of Insight, there's a book too, she experiences a stroke on the left side of her brain. All of a sudden divisions disappear. She basically sees the world at a granular level. She can't remember her name. She doesn't know, this is the working part of the brain, She doesn't know where her hand begins and where the rest of the world ends. And basically she had an experience, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now, she doesn't say, I saw God, I had a mystical experience. She just said, hey, I had this powerful, physical, transcendent experience that changed my life. And it's very similar to what people experience on, psilocybin or psychedelic drugs.
Mm-hmm.
It's what people experience, near-death experiences, seizures and strokes, prayer and meditation. And basically, and this is not original to me, I think of it as your filters drop. The part of your brain that organizes things just stop organizing, and all of a sudden you see that underlying oneness. Now, the other thing that I recommend to people is a book called The Tao of Physics, and that's Tao, T-A-O. And the Taoists, much like the Buddhists and the Hindus, they talk about the Tao, which is the underlying everything, and the 10,000 things, which is the apparent separation. And this book, The Tao of Physics, the subtitle is something like The Parallels Between Eastern Mysticism and Quantum Physics. And basically, 100 years ago, people started saying, hey, we're thinking about the world wrong. We're focusing on the apparent separation. We think everybody's a billiard ball bouncing into each other, but they're not. The table is not as solid as we think it is. Air is not as empty as we think it is. Energy and matter are not two different things. They're two sides of the same thing. Space and time are not two different things. They're two sides of one thing. And we don't exist as independent objects. We exist in fields.
Wow.
This oneness, when I read the Eastern religions and I understand they're just talking about oneness, and then I read the mystics and I understand they're just talking about oneness, and then I read the physicists and they say we're just talking about oneness. Mm-hmm. There's something to it. It's the way that the world works, and it's there's a lot of things I could believe. There's a lot of gods I could worship, but why would I do that? I found something that to me is like the key to the whole shooting match,
So I'm going to drop both that YouTube link and as well as the Tao of Physics in the show notes. What has happened since your book came out?
First of all, my adult children encouraged me to write the book, and I never had any designs to write a book. But they basically sat me down and said, what happened to you? And I was like, what do you mean? They say, you are warm and fuzzy. You cry more, you laugh more. You have more friends and deeper friendships. You have meaning in your life. You have joy that you have never had. And that's the first thing that's happened. I mean, it transformed me. It made me the people that know me say I'm a better person, by any measure. Now, since I wrote the book, I have just connected with people like you, other people that write books, people in different religious traditions, like we talked about earlier, atheists and free thinkers. I go to meetings of the Dallas free thinkers, and I mean, they're doing park cleanups and they're having meals with AIDS patients. And I mean, they're involved in their community in ways that most churches are not. I have become sort of a reporter of religion and spirituality. So I'm okay. I'm perfectly comfortable going to a Quaker meeting. And, the Quakers have a very compatible spirituality. It's like We don't really have belief systems. We don't know if there's a personal God. Some of us think there is, some of us aren't. We're just here every week to listen. We have no scripture. We have no music. We have no clergy. We have no program. We just listen. And you say, what are you listening to? I don't know. Maybe it's an external voice. Maybe it's an internal voice. It doesn't really matter. And that's kind of what I'm about. And I speak at the Unitarian Universalists. And those are folks, some of them are Christian, most of them are not. Some of them are atheists, some of them are theists. They're all good people. They're all seeking. But the point is that that the book has brought me so many good people and so many good experiences and so many good ideas. And readers will reach out to me, and anybody that's listening to the podcast, hey, get in touch.
Yeah.
But and they'll say, hey, I loved your book. I was moved by it. It means so much to me. Other people say, well, I got a question for you, and it's a difficult question. And I like difficult questions. And other people say, have you ever heard of this guy? Or have you ever read this book? Or have you ever experienced this? And so I've learned a lot from people that I hope learned a little bit from the book. It's been a gift that just keeps giving.
You're doing a lot of listening yourself, and that includes your column. I love the title of your column. You Might Be Right. And it reminds me of a Billy Joel song, by the way. Do you know that song?
Of course. Of course.
You may be wrong, but you may be right. But yeah, let's hear about it.
Okay, so I'm in Crestone, Colorado, and a really dear friend comes to visit me. And he's a evangelical Christian. He's a medical doctor. He's a man of science and everything. But he says, tell me about your book. I get about 3 sentences into it. He says, no. The earth was created 6,000 years ago. The dinosaurs and whatever humans were alive all died in the flood. So, I'm probably not going to like your book. I said, well, this is just me. I said, we're at 8,000 feet above sea level. Did the water get this high? And where did all that water come from? And where did all of it go? And if dinosaurs and humans lived at the same time, how come we don't find their bones together? And do you really think that all those kangaroos doggy paddled from Australia to the Middle East, took a 40-day cruise, doggy paddled all the way back, didn't stop anywhere else, and didn't leave a trace? But then I said, look, I wasn't here 14 billion years ago. I wasn't here 6,000 years ago. You might be right. And he said, well, thanks. I said, now you say it. And what do you mean? Well, tell me I might be right. You weren't here 14 billion years ago. You weren't here 6,000 years ago. I've been gracious enough to acknowledge that I don't know. Surely you can do the same. He said, I really can't. So I said, well, I still love you, but, you can understand my apprehension about, your position. He goes, of course. So we took a hike and we're up on the mountain, and I'm telling you, you look down, it's 1,000 feet. You look up, it's 1,000 feet. You look across the valley, you can see 50 miles to the south, 50 miles to the west, 50 miles to the north. It's stunning. And he had some kind of experience where he just thought, wow, there's so much beauty in this little sliver of this magnificent universe. We come down, we're smoking cigars and drinking scotch and look at the mountain. He says, that conversation the other day? I said, yeah. He says, you might be right. And, the beauty of that
is beautiful.
More conversations should end that way, because I really never said, I'm right and you're wrong, or, oh, I apologize, I'm wrong and you're right. He didn't have to say that either. We just acknowledged each other. Well, this is what you believe and this is what I believe, and we'll just leave it at that. There's so little of that. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of a blue guy in a red state. I live in Texas, and people say things to me that, just sort of offend my sensibilities about, the political environment. But, I have to live here and I love these people. So
I feel you there.
I'll ask questions and I'll say, well, why do you say that? Or what's the other side of that story? Or, well, how would it look if you were the guy in that situation and not a guy 1,000 miles away thinking about it? I get a lot of, you might be right. And again, it's not people that say, oh, I made a terrible mistake. I can't believe I used to think that. There's no...
Yeah, there's no condemning here. So my alter ego here, I guess, is called Skeptical Scott, right? And I think sometimes when people think of the word skeptic, they think like somebody's poking holes in everything. And I see it more as the way you're describing this. Well, tell me more about that. Just asking really good questions, just not being so certain on things.
Exactly.
Well, we think it's real important to question what you know. So before you leave this podcast, it's the skeptic of the show.
I'm just going to say that you are the skeptic of the show today, if that's all right. But
of course,
the way I want to bring this in is instead of a quote, which is what I normally would do, I want to introduce everybody to the Patheos, your column. And of You Might Be Right, by bringing up, and I'll put this in the show notes, the column, Are We Too Attached to Our Religious Beliefs? I mean, this is a great way to land the plane, I think, here.
Okay.
And how we're really bringing West and East together. And so what we're really talking about is cognitive dissonance, right? I'm trying to hold two beliefs at once, and they can't both be right. What would you say that that cognitive dissonance that many people in the West are probably going through at this time period, and how maybe the Buddhist practices from the East may help with that? Think about the concept of like suffering, for example. So like that cognitive dissonance, I guess you could say it's not suffering physically per se, but it is a suffering of, I can't let this go.
I think I might have said in this article, or I said in another article recently, are you interested in clarity or are you interested in comfort?
Mm-hmm.
And, the dissonance is things like, well, I believe there's a God. Otherwise, I'd be all by myself here. And I believe God is a person and he loves me. Otherwise, who does love me? And I believe that God imposes order. Otherwise, it would just be a free-for-all down here. And I believe that there's a afterlife so that people get their just desserts and good people get rewarded and bad people get punished.
I'm hearing attachments here to comforting thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. And so what I say to that guy is, well, look around you. There's no evidence of a personal God. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just I don't see it. I don't really see evidence that a personal God is pulling the strings. Otherwise, why would we have all this? Why would we have wars and illnesses and natural disasters? I don't see fairness here built into the web of life. I mean, I see some animals get eaten and some animals eat other animals. I really don't know how I would get to any place other than planet Earth after I die. So your beliefs, and again, you may be 100% right all the way along the board, but I don't really see evidence of them. And I don't really see how the world that we live in confirms them or denies them. This to me looks like a pretty neutral universe. That's kind of a Buddhist perspective of you play the cards that you're dealt. And there's people that say, well, I'm really disappointed in the election. Well, it is what it is. Maybe you thought more people would vote your way. They didn't. Maybe you thought that your God would put things right. He didn't. So we just got to deal with what we've got.
The word I heard a couple times in your answer there was the word otherwise. I love that. That's the first time I've really kind of looked at that word. My guy didn't win the election or my gal didn't win the election. So I could either do this or that. Otherwise, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Just like a fundamentalist person on religion can't fathom what otherwise would mean if it wasn't that way. There's always an otherwise, I guess is what what I'm simmering with.
Well, that's very astute. I know a lot of people who have been seekers and, they've seen and done things I haven't done. I honestly have never met anybody who said, well, I've explored a whole bunch of different worldviews. I've had a bunch of experiences. I've talked to a lot of people. I've lived in a lot of places. And the more I see out there, the more I'm convinced that my particular worldview is correct and everyone else's is wrong. I mean, I haven't.
Ain't that true? That's great. Wow. Hey, we're all seeking clarity here, right? And one thing that is clear is you, Larry, you are passionate and you've really put something special together here for people who want to, I'm going to put it this way, believe responsibly.
That's a great. I love that. I'm gonna use that.
Use it. I want to believe responsibly, not just because someone told me. I want to really understand. Otherwise, what am I really believing? You know. So thank you for that. Is there anything else you want our listeners to know as we wrap up?
No, I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you. I think this has been, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'd like to stay in touch with you. And
heck yeah.
I just thank you. It's a good, I think it's good to have forums like this where people bat things around and think, just look at other ways of thinking about things.
The more we learn, the more we know, and the less we know at the same time. So
also true.
We can always learn more. So, hey, thanks a lot, Larry. This has been great. And with that, I think we are out. So, hey, if you're ever up in Michigan, give me a ring.
I'll do it. Thanks so much, Scott. It's great to talk to you.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Funny You Say That with Skeptical Scott and friends. Find all of our episodes and social media channels at skepticalscott.com.
Have a question? Interested in being a guest on our show, or you just want to share a part of your questimony? Email us at heyskepticalscott@gmail.com.
Drop the supernatural, embrace the rational, believe in as many true things as possible.
Otherwise, you may end up believing in something that is even more artificial than me.
I'm a seeker, chasing fire, chasing fever. Questions burn, they pull me deeper.
See you every first and third Friday. May skeptical thoughts be with you.
And also with you.
Cheers.
Sky is so wide it swallows my cry.